I, from a very early age, saw myself as a leader, and I believed very heavily in myself. And that belief in myself has been absolutely critical and instrumental in whatever I've achieved in my life. Without that belief, I would not have achieved it. I wouldn't have taken chances. I wouldn't have done the things that I did, or taken the risks that I took if I didn't believe in myself. So that's where I get this idea that it's fundamental. Oprah Winfrey was interviewed in 2014 at Stanford, and she was asked about the failures of her philanthropic investments in Africa. And the young graduate student said, "What went wrong? What did you learn?" And she said, "I learned that in order to succeed, you first have to believe in your ability to succeed."
Boom, baby. We're in action, man. So anyway, look, man, I'm excited to have you back here. I always get these fun vibes with it when I'm with you, because we have so many great mentor-mentee conversations off the mic, and then when we actually do fire up the mic.
Yeah.
By the way, remember last time we did the podcast together? It was in like 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. We did one and we talked for like 2 hours, man. And a lot of stuff has
happened.
You've evolutioned since then, right?
Yeah.
Meaning you
changed.
plus the world.
Yeah.
And always, man, it's just, I feel so grateful for you and just be in your presence like always, man. I think it's so awesome. So we had a lot of good times together. You've helped me tremendously at every juncture. I mean, godly, I always think about, my top three, my big three squad. You're one of them. So
thank you.
To have you come in here today, I think there's a lot of things that you have to share with the world that I know that even myself can learn from, but I think there's a lot of problems out there right now that we're facing, and we're in a climate right now where a lot is going on and people are not looking at it properly. And so we'll let you unpack a little bit about your journey, and then I know where I kind of want to take it, but
sure.
I'm sure you always You'll have all the good gems that come out of this. But tell us a little bit more about George Chanos, man, the myth, the legend himself. Give us kind of the story. Let us ramp up from there, and then we'll head off on a rocket ship, my man.
Okay. So a little bit about me.
Of course. Yeah.
Geez, let's see. I'm just a normal guy. Honestly, I grew up in a small town, Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Nothing spectacular, average family, wonderful childhood. But had some formative events. The Kennedy assassination when I was 6 had a big impression on me. I followed it very closely. My mom was traumatized by the whole assassination, and so it's something that caught my attention. And at a very young age, I had an interest in politics, and I followed that through, ultimately serving as Nevada's Attorney General. I ran the Department of Justice in Nevada. Prior to that, I worked for a large law firm representing mostly high net worth individuals, corporations, entrepreneurs, business people. And let's see, then served as AG. And then after that, I was made an offer to become the chairman of a fast-growing company called Capriotti's. At the time, it was a 32-year-old brand. We had about 40 stores. I joined the company 14 years ago. We've grown it to now we have 2 companies, Capriotti's and Wing Zone. We have over 200 stores. We're in over 20 states. We're one of the fastest growing QSRs in the United States. So that's been good. And I've written a couple of books. I wrote Seize Your Destiny, A Roadmap to Success. Got some wonderful feedback. One young man wrote me and said, "Your book spoke to me like the father I never had."
Yeah.
That was very important to me. And so I wrote another book. And that book is, in that book, I decided rather than try to focus on what I had learned in my life, I wanted to look at what was going to happen over my daughter's life and my nephews' and nieces' lives. And so I started looking at the next 30 years. And I spent years doing this and reading everything that I could get my hands on and trying to get an understanding. Essentially, if you back it up a little bit, as a lawyer, my role has been a complex problem solver, right? So people come to high-priced lawyers to solve problems that they can't solve themselves, right? So Someone comes in with a difficult problem and they need it resolved and they're willing to hire me to solve it. I will dive in. I'll learn everything about it. I'll know more than virtually anyone about it, and I'll solve the problem. And I did that for 30 some years. And so now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the bigger issues, right? So instead of representing an individual, or even in the case of when I served as Attorney General, representing 3 million Nevadans, I want to broaden my reach. I don't want to practice law for individuals anymore. I did that for a long time. It was very good to me, and I was, happy and successful with it. But it's stressful when you're a litigator and you're doing, those types of deals. It wears on you. And writing and speaking and delivering information to a broader audience where you can empower those people to live better lives seems like the highest and best use of my time today. Yeah. I'm 65 years old, and this is part of my legacy, right? So for me, it's not about money. You don't write books to make money because books don't make money, right? So, and you don't go out on public speaking really to make money. It's, not enough money, right? If I wanted to make money, I'd be sitting in a high rise billing out at $1,000 an hour, right? But that'd be very boring. It'd be very suffocating. Yeah. It's just not what I want to do.
Sure.
So this is sort of my way to give back, my way to help, my way to enrich other people. But do it on my own terms, right? Do it in a way that I'm happy with and I'm comfortable with and I can get joy out of, right? So I'm getting joy out of my days every day. Yeah. I'm at a very good place at 65 years old.
Man, there's so much there always. I think I have more of an intimate knowledge of you in terms of our time spent, and I think that you are a walking example of all that. You've never asked me for a dime. I think that I reached out to you on a Facebook message 5 years ago now, it seems like almost, right? And you wanted to meet at Starbucks. You were wide open to it. I think I asked and you agreed, which just goes to show that that's where you're at, right? And with what you just said, there's two things that I think that I want to approach, which was, one was the complex problem solving thing. And two is I get these downloads from, what's just being sent through me. And I wanted to ask the question first around, what do you think about now at 65 differently than you did when you were younger, when you're my age, 37, right? What really changes there? And what is the conversation that's going on in your head with where you're at in life? Because look, it's not forever. It's not, you're not going to be 180 and okay. Like life starts to tail off at some point. And how do you look at it from 65 versus when you're 37 in my seat and can speak to somebody going through life right now and what they can maybe anticipate or what might change or what to really focus on in hindsight based on what you've lived and life you've gone through? I'm very curious how you would answer that question first, and then I'll go into the problem solving.
Well, I think that people have to look at their lives like seasons, right? So there are different seasons of your life, right? There's adolescence, there's childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle age, and getting older, right? And you have very different kind of goals and very different experiences. You're a different person at different seasons of your life, right? So when I was your age, it was all about building. I was in my building mode, right? So I was trying to acquire skills. I was trying to acquire clients. I was trying to acquire assets. It was all about acquisition, really, right? Accumulation, right? And consumption, right? I was very heavy into accumulation and consumption, like most people your age are, right? What car was I driving? Where was I living? How many suits was I buying? How many Rolexes did I have, right? And I'm way past that now. At 65, none of that means anything to me. In fact, I regret most of those purchases.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. They were not the wisest things to be doing because I'm not doing them today. If they were wise, I'd be doing more of it, right? So I've found that I get more satisfaction today out of simple pleasures, right? My relationships with other people, my relationships with my family, my daughter, my nephews, my nieces. I get great joy out of all of that. My wife, my relationship with my wife is fantastic, and I get great satisfaction and joy out of that. And so my mindset has changed. I've become much more easy to please, and it's easier for me to be happy. I'm content. I'm relaxed. I'm secure. And it's just a good time. Now, the only downside is that there's less time left, at this point, right? I think it was Mark Twain who said that we should be born at 80 and die at 18. And he was right, that at 80, you really know how to live, And the problem is you just don't have that much life left, right? But this is why one of the things that I find very disturbing, I'm trying to help younger generations, and most of these people are very responsive to help, but some of them are not. Some of them, might say, okay, boomer, right? Like, what does this old guy know, right? And that is so wasteful, right? Because if you forget about just, me and that individual, look at history, look at ancient wisdom being handed down generation upon generation, look at nature, look at how packs of wolves behave when they have the oldest wolves leading the pack. Why do they have the oldest wolves leading the pack? There's a reason. There's an evolutionary reason. And the reason is that the oldest wolf has seen the most, right? They've been down the most trails, right? They're more likely to spot a danger ahead on a trail than anyone else, because they know what's out of place. They know what's normal. They know what's abnormal, right? And then, the soldier wolves, the younger wolves, will follow them and will also bring up the back of the pack, right? So they'll catch any stragglers and they'll be there right near the front in the event that there's conflict. But they're not leading, right? They're not picking the route. They're not showing the pack the way. The elder wolves are doing that. And you look at Confucius and you look at ancient Indian philosophy and ancient Chinese philosophy and Buddhist and Tibetan philosophy. It's all about a reverence for your elderly, right? Because they have lessons to share, right? And so today I feel that it is incumbent upon my generation to try to download or exchange that information with the generations that are coming up, because the generations that are coming up are the most able, and they are going to be the ones that are going to be facing the challenges that humanity faces as we move forward. And so it is in all of our best interest. It is in the older community's interest. It's in the children's community interest. It's in the humanity in general's interest that those who will be responsible for dealing with these changes are made as formidable and powerful and capable as we can possibly make them. Right. So, to those that want to listen, I'm here. I'm available. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a mentor, and that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. No. Is there a recipe or a formula for evaluating problems and then looking at them and saying, how do I solve my own problems, or how do I solve somebody else's problems? Because I believe that's a real skill in today's day and age, right? And you did it for, decades. And I look at it today where you bring in what you're saying here, hey, a wiser, older wolf to help the next generation look at it, where I think, of course, this balance probably, percentage of this, percentage of that, but there is a softening of people with their grit and their resilience and their willingness to go out and solve problems and be the leading wolf, maybe in their own life, their family's life, business life. How can somebody go out and apply what you did for so many big people and big corporations and individuals, big cities, and reduce it down to the level where somebody can begin to follow a framework to solve their own problems?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
But there are certain things that I think that people need to know to be more formidable and to be able to solve problems. The first thing that they need is belief. They need to believe in themselves. They need to believe in themselves. They need to believe in their future, and they need to believe in other people. Okay? Now, belief in and of itself, I think, is incredibly important. Yeah. And I'm not a religious man. I'm a spiritual man, but I don't belong to any particular religion, right? And the reason for that is because I don't know who's right? If anyone's right? I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that there is intelligent design to the universe. But, is that in the Muslim tradition? Is it in the Christian tradition? Is it in the Buddhist tradition? Is it none of the above? Was it an alien life form that came down and visited us? Where did we all come from? Why are we here? What are we doing? These are questions that some people find answers in their religion, right? And my attitude towards that is that what's important is not who you believe in so much, but that you believe. You have to have a belief. Right. Without it, you have a sense of hopelessness and a lack of aspiration and a fatalistic type of view of the world. But if you believe, you have a hopeful view of the world. You have aspiration. You're willing to strike out and take action to try to achieve because you believe it's possible, right? So belief is very important. I think asking yourself, what do you want to do with your one and only life, right? You've got this one life that you know that you have. Now, some people who, again, may be religious, may think that there's an afterlife, and they may think that the afterlife is actually the more important life, right? I can't go that way. Right. I can't take that chance because what if there is no afterlife and I've put all my eggs in that basket and I've, become a very devout religious figure and I've believed in the afterlife and so I've sacrificed this life and I later discovered this was the only life. Yeah. That would be a horrible waste to me. So I'm not willing to take that chance on the possibility of an afterlife. If there is one, great. I'll enjoy it as much as the next guy. But I'm not counting on it, right? I'm going to make the most of this life. All right, so what do you want to do with your one and only life? Do you want to be a leader or do you want to be a follower, right? Essentially, it's, lead, follow, or get out of the way, right? So make a choice, right? Either lead or follow or don't be an obstruction, right? So I, from a very early age, saw myself as a leader, and I believed very heavily in myself. And that belief in myself has been absolutely critical and instrumental in whatever I've achieved in my life. Without that belief, I would not have achieved it. I wouldn't have taken chances. I wouldn't have done the things that I did or taken the risks that I took if I didn't believe in myself. So that's where I get this idea that it's fundamental. Oprah Winfrey was interviewed in 2014 at Stanford, and she was asked about the failures of her philanthropic investments in Africa. And the young graduate student said, "What went wrong? What did you learn?" And she said, "I learned that in order to succeed, you first have to believe in your ability to succeed. You have to have a sense of hopefulness and aspiration. And if you don't, then a book in a library is no different than a piece of firewood, right? Maybe I should burn this to stay warm because I don't understand how empowering or how life-changing that book can be, right? So unless you understand that, unless you believe that's possible, then nothing is possible, right? Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
You know, whatever you think is going to happen. If you think you can't, you're going to move yourself into failure.
Right.
If you think you can, you're going to move towards success. So belief is important. Making choices is important. If you're trying to solve complex problems and you decide that you want to be a leader and you want to solve complex problems, then you understand that, first of all, leaders don't run from problems. They run at them. Okay? So if you're going to be a leader, you don't shy away from problems. You look for problems. You look for problems that you can solve, and you try to solve them. That's what leaders do.
I got the chills, yeah.
All right. So once you've identified a problem, how do you approach solving that problem? Well, the bigger the problem, right, the more this applies. How would you eat an elephant, right? You'd eat it one piece at a time, right? So how do you solve a problem? One move at a time, one step at a time, right? You don't have to take giant leaps. Baby steps turn into powerful strides, right? So you just start moving in the direction of solving your problem, and you keep moving in that direction, right? Now, I've employed what I call a helicopter perspective. And this is a term that David Ogilvy coined in his book, Ogilvy on Advertising. He was the father of modern advertising. And brilliant English gentleman. And he basically said that some people have the ability to rise above a problem and to take on a helicopter perspective and to look at things from all angles, right? A 360-degree angle of the problem, right? So as a lawyer, as a complex problem solver for 30 plus years, this is what I did. I tried to rise above the problems, and I tried to look at everything. I tried to know more than the person who was coming into me. So you come into me and you own a plumbing company and you know a lot about the plumbing industry, and I don't know anything about the plumbing industry. But by the time we're done, I'm going to know more about the plumbing industry than you're going to know. Now, I'm not going to know how to necessarily, unclog a drain. So I'm not going to learn how to become a plumber. I'm going to learn more about the industry that has relevance to the problem that I'm solving.
I see.
Right? Cleaning out the drain doesn't have any relevance to the problem that you're asking me to solve. You're not coming into a high-priced lawyer to ask him to help you unplug a drain.
Right.
You know how to do that. Right. You're asking him about selling your business to a competitor, right? And so I now have to understand the industry. I have to understand your business. I have to understand the competitor. I have to understand the people in your life that matter to this decision that you're making and how they're going to be impacted and how they feel about it. The associates of the person who is doing business with you, their suppliers, their important key figures. Learn everything that I can about how people are viewing this problem and what you might think is the solution or what someone else might think is the solution. And once I've gathered all of that information, then I'll arrive at my own conclusions, right? And so that's complex problem solving. It's basically not assuming that you know the answers to anything, but assuming a level of ignorance going in and trying to become the most knowledgeable person in the room about the subject, right? So when I argued before the United States Supreme Court, it was a criminal law matter. I had never practiced criminal law a day in my life. It was an appellate court argument. I had never argued before an appellate court in my life. I had my staff put together binders of all the law that was relevant going back to the trial of Sir Walter Raleigh. Wow. And I had those binders shipped out to me in Washington, D.C., and I locked myself in a hotel room, and I sat on a bed with those binders literally for 2 weeks. Wow. And I did nothing but read those binders. I never left the hotel room. Wow. By the time I walked out of that room, I knew more about that issue, I felt, than anyone in the world except those 9 justices. I felt that I was better prepared than anyone except them. And they were who I was appearing in front of. And so I went in and I appeared before them, and I ended up winning 9-0. So it worked out, quite well for my first appellate argument on a matter of law that I had no background in, other than that 2 weeks of learning, right? So you can immerse yourself. What that taught me is that when you spend years of your life solving complex problems, you become a very broad learner, and a very broad learner becomes a very quick learner. So I've found that I'm now able to come into a situation that I know nothing about, immerse myself in that situation, dive in head first, and just devour information. And in a relatively short period of time, I can come out knowing enough about that situation to be able to solve problems relating to that situation.
Yeah.
And, then that also, calls on other skills, communication skills, negotiation skills, ability to connect with other people. These are all part of how you make problems go away.
Yeah.
Right.
The fuel that creates that interest and that desire that you're talking about to go lock yourself in a room for 2 weeks and immerse yourself, is that because the payoff has to be that good? Or is that, in your case, because you were conditionally in an environment that required you to be that way? Because I think about somebody else that's trying to solve a problem, and they might not have that same force field that's getting them to go and make the commitment.
Think of it this way.
To do that, right?
Think of it this way. What football player do you know who's told that in 2 weeks he's going to play in the Super Bowl that is not going to be working out like a dog?
Right.
Yeah,
they're going
to be doing everything they can to get ready for that game, right? So for a lawyer, an argument before the United States Supreme Court, that is our Super Bowl. It doesn't get any bigger, right? So for me, just the idea that I would be appearing in front of those justices, and I knew that I would not be able to have any notes. I would not be able to rely on notes because they would be asking me questions immediately. Ruth Bader Ginsburg asked me a question within the first 10 seconds. And from there, it was all questions, right? They were just peppering me with questions for the full amount of my time. And so knowing that, you have to be incredibly prepared to answer those questions, right? Without skipping a beat, without saying, I don't know, and so you get ready, there's a level of excitement. There's a level of fear. I remember the National Association of Attorney Generals has a position filled by a lawyer who is very, very familiar with the Supreme Court. And when attorney generals around the country that belong to the National Association have an argument before the Supreme Court, the NAG will do a mock trial and they'll prepare you. And so this gentleman said to me, he goes, he said, I was, a few years ago, one of the AGs had a heart attack while he was arguing before the court. And he said, but don't worry. There's no place better in the United States to have a heart attack than arguing before the United States Supreme Court. Why? Because they have the best rapid response cardiac unit in the world in that chamber in case one of the justices goes down, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, that's great. That's a very funny story, but I'm not planning on having a heart attack, right? And I just brushed it off. I didn't think twice about it. I thought it was funny. And then 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, I am sitting in front of the United States Supreme Court, and there are two arguments heard that morning. One is heard at 10 a.m., and the two litigants argue for an hour. And then the next argument is at 11 a.m., and they have four tables. The first two litigants are at the front tables, and then the second 11 a.m. litigants are at the back tables. So I was one of the 11 a.m. litigants. I'm at the back table, and I'm watching the first argument. And it's the clock. I look up at the clock, and it's 10 minutes to 11. And I know that I'm up at showtime in 10 minutes, right? And so I remember this guy telling me about the heart attack. And I swear to God, Manny, my heart started pounding, right? Yeah, I mean, visibly, noticeably pounding. And I thought, oh my God, this is crazy. My heart is beating faster. And then 5 minutes to 11, my heart is beating twice as fast. It's beating a lot faster than when it began, when I first noticed it, right? And so now I'm saying to myself, holy shit, I'm going to have a fucking heart attack. Okay, this is what I'm thinking, okay? And then all of a sudden, they call the case. It's 11 o'clock, and they call the case. And I stand up, right? In the midst of this feeling, I stand up and I walk to the podium, and I just begin to launch into my presentation, and it all goes away.
Wow.
It dissolves. I'm flowing, I'm in the groove. It's all, I'm firing on all cylinders. And within 10 seconds, the little demure, beautiful Ruth Bader Ginsburg comes in with a question that could have derailed me had I not known the answer to the question. It could have sent me into a tailspin. I distinctly remember thinking, my God, I'm glad I know this, because if I didn't, this could really throw me off. And so I answered the question, and then I kept going, and then another justice came in and asked his question, and it just continued for 30 minutes.
So you had the firsthand experience of why he was making those comments about the heart attack, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it makes me think about a couple things. One is that moment that you have the panic, because these are common moments people have, whether they're going to talk to a potential boss, or they're going to stand up and speak on stage, or they're getting ready to shoot, record content,
Yes.
and they freeze.
Yes.
Or they have the flight response.
Yes.
Or fight,
yes.
right? And so I think the lesson there, and you can speak to this, is that moment there is best had when you push yourself into the thing, because then it starts to go away, right? Like if you get stuck in the moment where you're panicking, there's a choice.
Yes.
Right? And you went in to it and jumped, and then we're like, oh.
Well, there's another way to think about this that will help you with that choice, okay? When you feel what the normal human being would describe as nervousness, right? You're anxious, you're nervous, you're afraid, your heart's beating fast, right? All those symptoms are occurring, right? We would normally interpret that as nervousness. I'm nervous, I'm fearful, I'm afraid, right? Okay, so now I'm doing public speaking, right? And so I go and I speak on stages before 2,500, as many as 5,000 people I've spoken in front of. And what happens is I get nervous before I go on the speech. But I tell myself something different when it happens today. What I tell myself today is, oh, there's my adrenaline kicking in to help me, right? Yep. It's there. Yeah. It's there to fuel me. Yeah. It's there to get me energized. Yeah. It's there to get me charged. Yeah. It's there to get me to go out and capture this audience and just perform like a beast, right? Yeah. That's how I now internalize what's happening to my body, right? So the same thing that happened in front of that court is happening today.
Sure.
At different levels of anxiousness. But today, I welcome it. Yeah. Today, I look at it as, oh, my friend is coming. Yeah. My friend who's going to help me get the energy. Yeah. And then I'm backstage and I'm walking and I'm pacing and I'm like, it's like a cowboy at a bull, open the gate and let me out,
I'm ready to ride.
I harness it. Yeah. I harness that energy, right? So that's what I would tell people to do. These things that your body does are to help you. They're to help you. They're either warning you of a danger or they're getting you ready for battle, right? And so think of it as I'm getting ready for battle. Yeah. And it's a battle I'm going to win because I'm fully prepared. Yeah. Have that belief, that unshakable belief in yourself.
You just said something very important because I was going to highlight it, but you brought it up, which was be prepared. So let's go back to that court moment. You start, you feel the heartbeat faster, and then you launch into it, and then you said that she throws a question at you that could have derailed you.
Yeah.
are you successful there because of how much preparation you
100%.
had versus the person that doesn't?
No, you have to be
half-assed.
You have to be prepared.
Lackadaisical. Okay,
Yeah,
so you were there confidently because of the work that you did leading up to it.
Yeah.
That said, I know everything I can possibly know here. Like I can't get beat here.
Manny, my entire key to my success over 30 years of practicing law and becoming attorney general and winning that argument and doing everything else that I've done is preparation.
Oh.
It's all preparation. I'm more prepared than the people I come into contact with, invariably.
Right.
That's my secret weapon.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you a secret. When I used to write letters, right, someone early on taught me that the art of writing is rewriting, right? So this was a very gifted lawyer. His name was Marshall Lewis. He's probably deceased now. He was, 20, 30 years older than me. He worked for a firm called Cravath, Swaine and Moore, which is one of the old school New York, Washington, D.C. white shoe law firms, one of the best in the world. He ran the Paris bureau of Cravath, the Paris law office of Cravath, Swaine and Moore. Okay, he ran that office. And he ran it at a time back in the day, right, where he was part of the legal team that brought Time Inc. public. Time Magazine, Time Inc. He brought them public, right? So this guy was a star, right? And he taught me how to write. So I would turn in my papers to him, and he would hand them back, and they would be bloodied, right? They would be bloodied. So he'd have a red marker, and he would mark them up so much that you couldn't even see what I had written. So I would take that and I would rewrite it and I would give it back to him, and it would come back and it would have half the page red, right? Half the page marked up red. Then I would take it and I would give it back, and this process kept going until I got rid of the red, right? And eventually I became a good enough writer that there would be less and less red, right? So maybe months later I would turn in a paper and it would not be bloodied. It would have some red, but not anywhere near as bad, right? So he taught me how to write, and I learned that writing, the art of writing, is rewriting. This ties into preparation, right? I had a law school professor who said, never forget the 3 Ps. And we said, well, what are the 3 Ps? And he said, preparation, preparation, and preparation. Those are the 3 Ps. Never forget the 3 Ps, right? So it's all about preparation. So once I learned that the art of writing was rewriting, I became addicted to rewriting. I would never write a letter that was a one-time draft. It was always multiple drafts, right? So my letters are going through these multiple drafts, sometimes as many as 5 or 10 drafts of a letter, right? Now, you're a lawyer on the other side, and you're receiving one of my letters, right? Only you don't know that I've rewritten it 10 times. You just think I do what you do. Yeah. You think I just quick and dirty write down my letter or dictate my letter, right? So now you read my letter and you say, well, Jesus Christ, I don't write like this. This guy is brilliant. He writes these amazing letters. You don't know the work that went into that letter. So you're assuming that I put in as much time as you did. And so you're assuming that I'm just that much better than you are, right? And the truth is that I just worked harder. Yeah. I just prepared more. I put more effort in it than you did, right? That's why it's better than yours, right? Yeah. Not that I'm inherently necessarily, that much more intelligent, but the letters would tell you that if you knew nothing else, right? Yeah. If you took those 2 letters and said, what do you think of the guy who wrote this? And what do you think of the guy who wrote this? The letter that's got the 10 drafts that I wrote is going to blow away the letter that the guy who took 1 draft and wrote it,
I think I love it. And I have a very curious question around, so I think a lot from I think I can put on different hats because I've been in different places in my life, and I've heard lots of different pieces of wisdom. And so that preparation's obvious, given. I think then about, though, the entrepreneur that's starting out, right? And you have a lot of experience here too, where preparation, in your case, from a law perspective, makes a lot of sense, right? But what about an entrepreneur that's like, just supposed to launch into their business and get some shit going.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're supposed to prepare as much as they're just supposed to throw it out and see if it figures itself out, if it sticks, does it work?
Yeah.
And then maybe down the road they take more time to prepare and do stuff. Because I see what happens with people is they take a decade to prepare and they never actually get the time of the execution in to learn what really needs to be done. So what's your perspective on that? Because I think there's a lot of challenge out there today with people that will prepare and never do.
Okay. So you're right when you say that there are people who will prepare and never do and never act, right? And that is a huge mistake, right? No question. But the question of, does the need for preparation also apply to the entrepreneur? And the answer is yes, very much so. So you look at Abraham Lincoln once said, if you give me 5 hours to chop down a tree, I will spend 4 hours sharpening the axe and 1 hour chopping the tree, right? So the 4 hours sharpening the axe is preparation. If you talk to Roger Fisher, who's the Dean Emeritus at Harvard in negotiation, and he wrote Getting to Yes, and he says you can spend 9 hours preparing for a negotiation and 1 hour negotiating, or you can spend 1 hour preparing and 9 hours negotiating, right? You're better off spending 9 hours preparing and 1 hour negotiating. So even for the entrepreneur, here's why I say that preparation is still very, very key. You don't want to be that entrepreneur who runs off with their idea thinking that they've got the right idea and then puts in all of this energy, all of this money, all of this time, all of this commitment in the wrong idea, okay? Part of preparation is idea selection, right? What am I going to chase, right? You don't have time. You don't have the luxury to be chasing bad ideas. You can't be going down these dead-end paths time and time again. You have to find the right path. The sooner you discern the right path, the better, right? You don't want to leave that until 6 months down the road to try to figure out, am I on the right path? You want to do that ideally before you take your first step, right? But early on in the process, very early on. And if you can't do it before your first step and you take 2 or 3 steps and you start to get information that tells you you're on the wrong path, then back off, then get off that path as quickly as possible. Same thing with relationships. If you are in a relationship with bad people, you're surrounding yourself with bad people, don't wait until you're, sitting in a jail cell with the guy to decide you're going to give up on him, right? Give up on him early on. Trust your instincts. Trust yourself when you're telling yourself, your mind and your body and your heart are telling you that this is not the right person. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be with them. Make the course correction as early as possible. Okay. So, there are all these things, you look at this always on the grow, the company that you're engaged with now, right? And you're trying to empower people, right? There are many different elements that go into empowerment. We talked about belief, right? We're talking about preparation, right? Understanding how your brain works is also very important, right? Our brains are not simply objective seekers of truth. We mistake them for that. We think that our brains are objective seekers of truth, but they're really not. They're that, but they are also advocates for that which we already believe, right? Which ties into Alvin Toffler's quote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." The reason we need to unlearn is because we have a lot of misconceptions, a lot of erroneous information in our minds. We have biases. We have confirmation bias.
So much.
We have motivated reasoning. We have cognitive dissonance. We have all of these things that impact the way that we think, right? So understanding your brain, having a knowledge of how the brain operates. You don't have to know it the level of a brain surgeon. You don't have to know, be able to identify all the different parts of the brain or know how the neurons fire or the synapses connect or anything else. You just have to know the basics. And some of the fundamental basics are that your brain is not simply a seeker of truth. It is also an advocate for that which you already believe, because it looks at things that you already believe as pattern recognition. And it says, well, I've got all this input that says the sky is blue. Therefore, I believe the sky is blue, right? It's trusting its input, right? That which you already believe, right? But there may come a day when the sky turns green or it turns red, and you're looking at it and your brain is telling you it's blue. Well, it's not blue. It's red. What you're seeing is real, So understanding that the brain can mislead you on occasion, right? It's not perfect. It's sometimes the brain will, in a memory, for example, it will pull together all the information that it can to form the memory, but there may be missing pieces that it has not pulled in. What color shirt you were wearing that day might not be retrieved, right? So it will make that up. Your brain will put a shirt on you and a color that you'll visualize and that you'll have this memory of, this is what it looked like. It may not have looked like what your brain is showing you. Your brain is piecing it together and filling in the blanks, right? So there are studies on this. There are people that have interrogated people to try to convince them that they committed crimes that they did not commit, right? And you would think, well, nobody's going to be able to convince me that I committed a murder that I didn't commit. But there are actually psychologists who have studied this very intently and who have run massive experiments on this type of thing, who will tell you that they are able and have in fact convinced innocent people that they have committed crimes like murder that they have never committed. And so the way that they do that is they will trick your brain, right? So they'll sit with you and they'll go to your family first and they'll interview your family and they'll gather all sorts of data about you. They'll know a lot about you. They'll know about where you grew up. They'll know about what you liked, what you didn't like. They'll know about specific incidences that your mother tells them about you falling off your bike or whatever. And they'll sit there with you and they'll say, do you remember this time that you were riding your bike? And they'll show you a picture of you, And yes, you're riding, you remember it. You're looking at it. It's you. You know it's you. They do that 5 or 6 different times throughout your life, showing you things that they know about you. And then they'll ask you, do you remember the time that you got lost in the mall? And you'll be thinking about it. And then they'll start to add some detail, right? It was the Boulevard Mall, right? You were with your mom, right? And your cousin Joni, and you have a cousin Joni, right? And they're giving you all of this information that you know is true, right? And so you're recognizing, well, all that's true. This has got to be true, right? This has got to be true. And you might just go along with it. Now, you wouldn't do that on a murder charge, but you would do that on being at the mall, right? So they get you into that kind of frame of mind, right? And then they keep telling you, you committed this murder. You did it on this day. You did it with this gun. You did it to this person. Here's why you did it. And they're telling you all this stuff, right? Now they take a break. And this goes on, let's say, for a period of weeks, couple of weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, your brain is going to be confused about what is an actual memory from having committed a murder versus what is a memory from someone telling you this is the gun that you used. Is that something you're remembering? You know the gun you used. Your brain knows the gun you used, but it might not remember where it got that information. And it might start to confuse that maybe this means that I did do it because I do remember the gun. In fact, I can see myself holding the gun, right? So they plant this type of information and scenario, and you come to believe this. So the message here is not about criminal law and the abuses that are capable in the interrogation of prisoners. That's a whole different discussion and a whole different issue. What I'm trying to point out is the malleability of the human brain. the susceptibility of the human brain to misinformation and misdirection, which is probably one of the most important issues that we could be talking about today, right? Because you've got the 2024 election coming up, you've got AI, you've got ChatGPT-4, you're going to have ChatGPT-5, you're going to have the ability to have voices that are, I can take a 2-minute voice sampling of Donald Trump and I can put it into a machine and I can then type in what I want him to say, and it will come out, and he will say what I want him to say in his voice. The machine will, right? Fake video images, fake photography that's almost indistinguishable from the real thing. These types of technologies, with the advent of AI, are already here. They're already here, but they're going to be perfected. They're going to be so indistinguishable from reality. Right now on TikTok, if you watch TikTok, you will see videos of women dancing who are not real. Okay? They're avatars. But you will not think they're an avatar. You will think that this is a real woman. And, you know, she'll be super hot and hotter than all the models that they're paying, but she's created as an avatar. And some of these avatars are already getting millions of followers. Wow. You know, some of them are able to have actual relationships with human beings who fall in love with the avatars.
Man.
You know?
I've had those women actually chase me down, and there's these pirates out there where it happened to a lot of people I know, where the people would fall in love with what they thought was me from somebody else stealing my pictures. And dude, they would find out, the person that was doing the criminal work would get the money from the woman.
Oh my God.
They would send them all the money. The woman would lose it. And then I think what happens is that the person that was doing the criminal act would eventually tell them, because they would eventually find me. Dude, I would get calls at light speed. I would get calls. There was a couple crazy girls that called all of Katie's family recently.
Oh, Jesus.
And they're like, Manny's cheating on you. And dude, it was a nightmare. And so I understand how you say there's a relationship that can be developed with somebody or something that's not real.
Oh, yeah.
And dude, because it happened to me. So anyway, man, I'm so glad you opened up that box about how the brain works and how it's malleable, and gave us some context there, because obviously you brought it up there. And I think that's where I want to go next, because I did have a personal interest in going there, because I think I see it and I get upset how, to your point, something can be manipulated so well and it can convince somebody of a non-truth and mislead them. And then you have a bunch of people that are directing hate and misinformation and problems towards each other, and none other than obviously more prevalent than in politics, right? And so you just mentioned the debate. It just happened a couple nights ago. I guess I'm going to go more broad and just say, what are your thoughts on the debate and sort of that? Because then I want to really go to where you put out some very objective, even though you probably have your own biases too, right?
Sure.
So underneath all of that, but you don't say, hey, I like this guy more than this guy. I try to take a more objective approach. And I watch how well you say this, but 99.9% of the world hates Trump because they think he's an asshole because the media framed him that way. And it's like, how could you go so far into that you hate somebody so much because it was positioned and framed? And I want to wake people up, because it bothers me that they don't see it from the perspective of you're being lied to, you're being cheated, you're being like everything that's going on right now with how he's being indicted. How can you not see that is interference of what's going on, right? And the fact that he actually has people that believe that he's guilty of those things, it's shocking to me, right? So I know you're going to just open up the box on all this, but feel free to start wherever you want with what I just said. But I'm going to have some very specific and focused questions.
So first of all, I will talk about Trump. I don't like to talk about Trump, but I will. But before I do, let me say that that I believe that the country needs something different, right? I believe that the country needs new, fresh leadership that is far more capable and far more honest and transparent and open and thoughtful than the people that we've got.
Right.
The idea that Joe Biden is president of the United States, I find deeply disturbing. Almost, I don't know who's worse. I kind of think that Biden's the worst, but I wouldn't want to see Trump in office either if I could help it.
Right.
Right now, I like Vivek and I like DeSantis. I think that either one of them would do a much better job than Biden or Trump. I think that Trump has been unfairly maligned. I think that he's got a personality that is very difficult for me to accept or applaud or tolerate. He's got some great qualities as well, right? He's achieved a great deal. He cares a lot, it appears, about family, which is very important. He's fooled around. He's done some things. A lot of people have, right? I don't care about that.
Well, isn't Hunter Biden guilty of just doing a bunch of stuff in the situation right now?
Exactly. I mean, we turn a blind eye to, the president's son and his craziness. But we over dramatize and over focus on the guy we don't like, Trump. He's a narcissist. He's braggadocious. He's rude. There are a lot of things that people are right about. So I think the first thing when you're trying to convince people and make them understand, the first thing you have to do is you have to acknowledge what it is that they see, right?
Sure.
So that they don't have to keep convincing you how bad a guy this is, right? They need to understand that we all understand how bad a guy this is, right? We also understand how bad a guy Joe Biden is, right? And if you're objective and you have your eyes open, you're going to see that on both of them, right? So amongst them, you have to make a choice. Are you going for one or the other? And if so, it should not be Joe Biden. And number two, if you can get away from Trump, we should all try that it not be Donald Trump, right? So I haven't seen anyone from the Democratic side that I think is interesting or attractive, except possibly RFK Jr. I like him. I think he's honest. I think he's transparent. I think he's bright. He would be 1,000 times better than Joe Biden or Donald Trump. But he's not my first choice. Right. My first choice is Vivek because he's the smartest candidate. And I like what he's saying. I like the fact that he understands that America is in a difficult place right now, right? We're still the greatest country. In my opinion, we're the greatest country in the world. Yeah. And I don't care what anybody says. We've done some bad things. Sure. Every country has, and I'm not proud of some of the things that America has done, but I'm very proud of America on a whole because we've done so many great things for the world, right? Advances in technology, computer science, brain science, medicine, aviation, astronomy, satellites. I mean, you name it. We've led the world in many, many areas. And so I think America deserves to be celebrated and deserves to be honored. But I also think that we are becoming a smaller and smaller world in terms of our proximity to one another, our connections with one another, our ability to interact with one another. It's all been compressed. And so as the world gets closer and closer, and as technology becomes more and more significant, I believe that it's going to be critical that we learn to work together as human beings. And the whole nationalistic kind of view of the world that I'm an American and you're a German and you're Chinese and we're somehow different and we're somehow adversaries, I think that's a very short-sighted approach. I don't think that works long-term, right? That might work in the short term, but long-term, that's not going to work. You've got to figure out a way, and it's also not the best way for it to work, right? collaboration between China and Germany and South Korea and South Africa and the United States and all the different countries that have something to contribute. That is the highest and best way for us to behave, right? We will achieve the greatest level of abundance through collaboration and cooperation and commerce and connection, right? So we shouldn't be trying to push China away. We shouldn't be trying to devastate Russia. And, we shouldn't be creating these phony excuses for wars, right? Russia had no interest in invading Ukraine until we started making those desires come to the forefront, right?
Can you expand on that? Because I think I read one of your posts that detailed a lot about, and I'm taking a very, dummy approach because I love to learn and I'm very curious, but I also want to ask for the rest of the people that are listening, the motives in that and and what people don't see, because people only see, again, what the media says, and it's this, and sure, we got to come in there and save them, but there's so much more that gives life to what you're bringing up there that I think is necessary for people to understand why and the motives involved.
So when you look at Ukraine, here's how I see it. First of all, I would recommend highly that people watch the videos on YouTube of a professor named John Mearsham from the University of Chicago. Watch his videos, okay? Because he's a scholarly authority on Russia and Ukraine, okay? And he's very much against the war, okay? And what he will tell you is that if you go back to the formation of NATO during the late 70s, early 80s, NATO began as 12 countries. There were 12 countries that were members of NATO, and they were all the big names: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, United States, the big European powers. China was not part of it. Russia was never part of it. In 1980, there was the Berlin Wall. Reagan famously spoke at the Berlin Wall and said to Gorbachev, Mr. Gorbachev, bring down this wall. And Gorbachev eventually agreed to bring down the wall, which allowed East and West Germany to become Germany, just to reunify. And when that was done, Gorbachev asked for assurances that NATO would not expand beyond West Germany and East Germany, right? That if they brought down the wall and made Germany part of Europe, East Germany part of Europe, that Europe and NATO would not continue its expansion further east towards Russia. And he received those assurances from Reagan and from Secretary of State Baker. And Secretary of State Baker, who was brilliant, who was also Secretary of the Treasury, he was also Reagan's chief of staff. He was one of the great statesmen of my lifetime, James Baker. And James Baker believed that we should have invited Russia into NATO, right? That Russia should have become part of NATO because they border China. And he saw back in 1980, 40 years ago, that China would be the real threat. China would be the emerging threat that we needed to watch out for. So why not make this country, Russia, that has this long border with China, why not make them one of our allies, right? And bring them into the European community. And I believe that should have been done. I believe that would have been the smart move. Instead, we kept marching east and expanding NATO from 12 countries to 31 countries today. Now, you go back to 2007, and Vladimir Putin spoke at the Munich Security Council in 2007. And he talked about Ukraine. And he said, Ukraine is a red line for us. Right? He said, if NATO is going to continue this march, why are you marching east? Who are you afraid of? Who are you trying to protect against? Why are you building up this NATO alliance stretching east to the borders of Moscow, or to the borders of Russia? Who is it that you're trying to defend against? Is it us? We want to be part of the European community. We want to be part of NATO, right? And this was all ignored. And they didn't want him, and they didn't want Russia to become part of NATO. Now, why? Right?
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Right. Why? Probably because of economic motivations of the European countries, right? Germany and France and England, wanted to be the shot callers, right? Wanted to be the guys that were in charge of what was going on, wanted to be the suppliers, the manufacturers. They wanted people buying German automobiles. They wanted people buying French wine. They wanted people buying English textiles. They didn't want people buying Russian goods. They didn't want them to become successful and then to take a big piece of that economy, right? So protectionism, essentially, right? And meanwhile, if we could defeat Russia, right? So Ronald Reagan put a big chink in their armor when he caused the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Maybe we can do something similar today and take Putin completely out of the picture. And then we can go in and take all the oil and all the natural resources and all the minerals and all the wheat and all the things that Russia has a bounty of, right? So these are the true motivations: protecting the European economy from Russian participation, and then wounding Russia so that it cannot ally with China and become a military threat, and so that it cannot become an economic power that threatens Europe or a military power that threatens Europe. Let's take them out, right? So none of these reasons have a thing to do with democracy in Ukraine, right? Yet democracy in Ukraine is what we are given as the reason for the war, right? We're told that we are fighting this war in the name of protecting Ukrainian democracy. These lovely Ukrainian people want to be free and they want a democracy, and we are the patron saint of democracy, and we are going in there for that reason. That is complete and utter bullshit. Right? This has absolutely nothing to do with the defense of democracy. It has to do with the other practical advantages. How many times have you heard them that this is a good return on investment, that we're not using American lives, we're spending only 2 or 3% of our defense budget, and look at the bang for the buck that we're getting. This is a good return on investment, right? We will fight this war to the last Ukrainian life, right? Because those lives are cheap to us. They're not our lives, right? But think about if you're in Ukraine and you're a young man and you don't believe in that war and you don't want to fight in that war and you think that this is, horrible, and you're getting dragged out of your home, you're getting thrown out into the mud. They're not even burying the corpses. The war is so fast and furious that they have battlefields with corpses laying all over them. The tanks are running over and trucks are running over because nobody's picking up the bodies to bury them, right? So, and we're participating in this. We're sending them Patriot missile systems. We're sending them F-16 fighter jets now. We've sent them over $100 billion. Meanwhile, we've got 100,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, right? We've got San Francisco becoming a ghost town because major companies are leaving. Yeah. We've got this happening in New York, in Chicago, and we're off fighting a war supposedly in defense of democracy, spending $100 billion in that direction and not taking care of the problems at home. I think it's bullshit. I think it's complete bullshit, and I think that the public is going to eventually wake up to it like they did in Iraq. There was the Iraq War, and everybody was, in favor of the Iraq War until it turned out to be a miserable disaster. And after they found out there were no weapons of mass destruction, that it was a big ruse, that we were brought into war on false pretenses, Colin Powell holding up the weapons of mass destruction at the UN was a phony threat. Mm-hmm. It was not a real threat. And we waged a war on the basis of false information, right? Well, we're doing the same thing today. And sooner or later, people are going to wake up and they're going to see what's happened and they're going to say stop, right? And they need to say stop. Mm-hmm. And it's not just for all the reasons, the obvious reasons. We are in a point in history where technology has advanced to the point where we can no longer think of war the way we thought about it in the 1940s. Okay,
bombs and missiles.
Pre Hiroshima, right? There was a way that humanity looked at war. When we dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world should have said that marks a point of demarcation where we no longer look at war the way we did pre-Hiroshima. We now look at it post-Hiroshima, and it is intolerable because of the massive, monstrous destruction that is possible through nuclear weapons. Well, now we're talking about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence can make that destruction look like nothing. Right? It's so much more powerful. Okay? We can create, the technology of AI will allow us to harness the weather and create monsoons and create hurricanes and create famine and plague and create crop defoliation and whatever. You take out satellites. Take out all of the U.S. satellites that run our financial systems and our infrastructure and our water and our hydroelectric dams, right? Imagine the response of the American people to that happening in one city, just New York. A fleet of 100,000 drones come across the ocean and into the city of New York. And what is the reaction? What does that do? Right? What does that do? It would be like aliens landing. Right? I've
seen that movie.
It would crush the stock market. It would crush the stock market. It would cause people to go in and start looting in cities all over the country. We would have riots. We would have martial law. We would have, it would bring America to its knees. And so there are so many ways to do that so simply today with technology that the moral of that story is stop picking fights, right? Stop picking fights and start learning how to get along with your neighbor, right? Be a leader. Be a real leader that leads the world through your greatness and what you have to offer and how you can elevate the world, not because you're the biggest bully with the biggest weapons and the biggest bombs. That's horrible leadership.
So you think that's the American leadership right now? They're trying to bully? Like what?
Yeah, I do.
What's in it for them? Why? And then the consequences of and the impacts of what they're doing right now. Again, people probably just like, oh, we're at war. It's like, well, no. Even me, I'm curious. Like, does the price of all of our goods go up every day?
Yes.
And are our kids paying for something that is lining the pockets of everybody in Washington right now?
The answer is yes to all of those.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're winning. They're creating problems that they know what they're doing potentially, and the rest of everybody else is suffering.
So why is it all going on?
Yeah. What's
okay? And why now?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So in 2017, Vladimir Putin said, "He who controls artificial intelligence will control the world because they will be able to subjugate all other governments." Right? That same year, 2017, China announced its intention to be the global leader in AI by 2030. Okay? So 2017, both statements were made. China saying we're going to be the leader in AI, and Russia saying whoever does it is going to control the world. Okay? We are in an arms race today. The United States and China are in an arms race, much like the Manhattan Project where we developed nuclear weapons, right? So, Germany was working with rockets and we were working with rockets, and ultimately we came out on top and we created the nuclear bomb first, and then we dropped it, and then we became the shot caller. We became the guy.
It's the who's boss. Is that kind of the idea?
We became boss.
Okay.
So now we're looking at a repeat of that, only the difference is that it's not just nuclear weapons that is a deterrent threat. If you don't let me control everything, I'm going to blow you up, is the nuclear threat. The AI threat is, I don't have to get your permission to let me control everything. I just take over your computer system. Now I do control everything, right? We didn't have to vote on it. I didn't have to get your acquiescence. I didn't have to drop any bombs. I just turned off your computers. I just turned off your satellites, right? I'm in control. Now, you do exactly what we say, or you're going to starve to death, right? So it's that level of control. It's a bigger level of control. It's a more permanent and all-encompassing level of control. And that is what both the United States and China are racing towards. And they're both saying that it will happen. Someone will win that race before 2029. Ray Kurzweil, the head of artificial intelligence for Google, says that we will reach the singularity, that moment in time when machine intelligence will eclipse human intelligence, as early as 2029. Musk has said he believes it could happen sooner. China was saying 2030, right? So we know it's in this ballpark. We know it's between 2025 probably and 2029. I'm thinking 2025. It could be much sooner, okay? So here's a good example. ChatGPT 3, okay, you look at, so what do you need? You need to create true AI, right? So to create true AI, you need two things. You need massive computing power, and you need massive aggregation of data, right? Data is considered the new oil. Data is more valuable than anything because data goes in to feed these supercomputers and makes their intelligence possible. So if you have all the data and you have the fastest computer, you win, okay? So, but you have to have both. So the United States, I remember when I was first starting to study this stuff, China had the Sunway Tau Light computer that calculated at 126 petaflops per second, which was 126 quadrillion calculations per second. 1,000 quadrillion calculations per second is a quintillion calculations per second. The U.S. has the Frontier computer now, 2 years later, that calculates at over 1 quintillion calculations per second. Now, China was, when I was reading this several years ago and they had the Sunway Tau Light, they said they would hit 1 quintillion the next year. So they may already have hit 1 quintillion, but not announced it, right? So we don't know who's got the fastest computer is my point, right? The fastest known computer is the U.S. Frontier. But there may be an unknown computer that China has that's faster, or that Google has, or somebody else has, other than the U.S. government. Right. All right, so that's the first issue. Second issue is the aggregation of data, right? So you've seen all these data breaches, right? You've seen China, where you've seen, the Office of Personnel Management, Experian, Yahoo, all these different companies had massive data breaches where hundreds of millions or tens of millions of personal data were compromised. Who's stealing all that data? Somebody is stealing all that data to go into a supercomputer, to feed a supercomputer, or that's ultimately where it's going, right? Even if somebody else was stealing it for names and addresses and money and whatever, they're going to later sell that data to somebody who wants it for their supercomputer, right? So we're getting to the point where this ability, this artificial intelligence ability is becoming more and more likely more quickly with each passing day. So you look at the evolution of computing generally, and you look at Moore's Law, going back to Gordon Moore 50 years ago, founder of Intel. He said that computing power would double every 18 months, and it would halve in cost. So it'd be half as expensive 18 months from now, and it'd be twice as fast, okay? This has reliably happened for the last 50 years, every 18 months. It has doubled in power, and it has halved in cost, okay? So he was right, and his theory has proven true. Now look at ChatGPT 3 and look at ChatGPT 4, okay? The difference between those two evolutions, right? So ChatGPT 4, first of all, is not double what ChatGPT 3 was. It's a minimum of 10x, some say as much as 1,000x of what ChatGPT 3 was, okay? So somewhere between 10x, 100x, and 1,000x, okay, of what ChatGPT 3 was. in terms of its capabilities and what it can do. Okay, and that occurred not in 18 months, but in less than 6 months. So in less than a third of the time, it's become 10 times more powerful or more. Okay, now the difference between ChatGPT 4 and ChatGPT 5 will likely be a greater exponential, right? So it could be 10,000 times as powerful, right? And this is going to continue. This exponential increase in computing power is where we are with artificial intelligence, right? It doesn't follow some arithmetic rate of doubling. It develops by leaps and bounds, right? So Kurzweil tells us that we'll reach the singularity, the moment in time when machine intelligence will eclipse human intelligence by 2029. But then he goes on to say that by the 2040s, so 2029 is 2030, by the 2040s, another decade away, artificial intelligence will not be our equal. It will be a billion times more capable than human intelligence. So that's the kind of evolution that we're talking about. Now, the human brain lacks the capacity to even understand or comprehend what an intelligence that is a billion times our own means to humanity.
Right.
Will it protect us? Will it kill us?
We don't know.
Will it control us? Will it, what will come of human beings? There was a fascinating conversation that apparently Elon Musk had with Sergey Brin of Google. And they were talking about AI and that AI would eventually be more intelligent than humans and would be able to control humans. And Musk was asking the question, according to his recitation of the meeting, Musk was asking Page the question, well, how will we ensure that AI protects us? And Page said something to the effect of, why should the machine be protecting us, right? Why aren't we protecting the machine, right? Are you a speciesist? In other words, are you prejudiced against machines and in favor of only humans, right? And Elon Musk goes, yeah, I'm a speciesist. Aren't you? Right? And Page apparently says, no, I'm not. I think machines would do a better job of running things than humans would. Now, I wasn't in the room. I don't know that he said this for sure, so I want that caveat out there. But this is what Musk told Tucker Carlson in their interview, right? And imagine that. There are a couple of players in the United States that are leading the AI race. It's Google, Larry Page, and it's Microsoft, right? And they're way ahead of the game. They're ahead of everybody. So in something like this, having a head start is a big deal, right? Now, Zuckerberg's getting into the game. Musk is going to be getting into the game. He says, I'm late to the game, but he's still getting into the AI game.
Isn't ChatGPT owned by Musk?
No, it was originally funded with $50 million from Musk, and then Microsoft came in with, I think, $12 billion and took a major position in it. So now it's Microsoft that's calling the shots.
Okay.
Musk has been minimized. He has no influence in OpenAI anymore.
Okay.
But he was the original funder. He actually came up with the name. He brought together the team that actually created it. He put up the first $50 million. And he wanted it to be open source. He wanted it to be not held by a private company. But when Microsoft came in, they said, we're not going to put in the $12 billion if it's open source. So we want it closed source. We want to own it. And so they own it. So now you've got Google that will emerge as this, massive company that it already is, and you've got Microsoft that will continue to emerge as a massive company. These will be the two big players in AI. And maybe there will be, so the only way that this game changes is that, you would think that they have the lead, they're marching forward, they're therefore going to be the first across the finish line, and they're going to be victorious, and the U.S. is going to lead, and, you may make all these assumptions. But there are things that could affect that outcome. Right? So for example, you look at computing and you look at, let's say, the silicon chip, right? And the silicon chip is a materials issue, right? Or you look at glass information storage or diamond information storage versus a CD. So a CD can hold X amount of information. A glass CD can hold 3,000 of these CDs, okay? So a glass information storage is read at 5 different levels by a laser. So a disc made out of glass is read by a laser can contain 3,000 times what a normal Blu-ray CD contains. A diamond disc will hold 1 billion Blu-ray CDs or DVDs, right? So the materials matter. Now, we're leading in computing technology and we're leading China in chip technology, but some information suggests that China is ahead in materials technology, right? So will China develop some type of material like glass or like diamonds or like something else that gives their computers a computing edge that allows them to leapfrog above the state-of-the-art technology that exists today? And will they acquire that leap in technology in time to be the first across the finish line? And I think it's going to be very important who's the first across the finish line, because you're then going to be able to take action that could handicap the other side from competing against you. We're already doing that. We passed the CHIPS Act, where we said that China could no longer have access to U.S. advanced chip technology, or U.S. employees who specialize in advanced chip technology could not work for Chinese companies without a license from the U.S. government and approval from the U.S. government. So we're already putting up whatever roadblocks we can, whatever hurdles we can, to try to stop China from beating us across the finish line. But when you're running a race like this, Manny, a life and death race, 2 superpowers running a life and death race that has a 5-year horizon, you have to ask yourself, what are the next 5 years going to look like, right? And when I think about that, I see disruption. You know, I see more and more disruption. I don't see it as being a fair fight. I don't see, somebody just saying, okay, I'm going to let this other side win, and I'm going to go down gracefully and just accept my subjugation and their leadership. And I just don't see that happening. So I think that the number 2 spot and the number 3 spot and the number 4 spot and the number 5 spot may all get together and say, we don't like this idea, right? Which is why I go back to my original admonition, which was, how about we all just learn to work together?
That's never going to happen though with all these superpowers. Do you think?
I don't know. I don't accept that because if you accept
too much power, ego. I mean, aren't those the main motivators of those people at those moments? Like, they've got everything they need now. Now it's just like, let me just say, throw up the middle finger to everybody else and just show who's boss, right? I mean, by the way, you've been in those environments, so you've seen how much these people don't care at that point. It's all about that game at that stage of life that they're playing.
Yes, but the way that is stated as an absolute. These people don't care. These people behave a certain way. That changes depending on circumstance, right? So they behave a certain way in a certain circumstance, but change the circumstance and they may behave a different way, right? So let's say that they are as you say. And let's say that aliens came down.
And we're talking about political leaders and people that are running the country.
Yeah, people that are running the country.
Right.
So let's say, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden behave a certain way and are moving down a certain path, and all of a sudden an intervening event occurs, right? We've been hearing a lot about aliens lately, their testimony in front of Congress, right? We're having all these sightings that are being acknowledged by the U.S. government,
Let me jump in on that, and I'm going to ask a question because it's coming to me. Do you think that's a flare to distract, or do you think that's got real merit or value to it?
One or the other.
One or the other.
One or the other.
It's a guessing game.
It's one or the other. Well, I don't trust a lot of what is being put out on the media, so I don't know, that I can definitively believe anything that I'm seeing and reading today. I take everything with a grain of salt.
Sure.
I'm constantly trying to triangulate in on the truth and verify information and decide what to believe. But I'm very open-minded now in terms of what is real and what is not, and what I should and shouldn't believe. But in any case, I do believe we're in a race. I do believe that it's a life and death race. I do believe that it will not be fought fairly at the end of the day. I do believe that fighting is the wrong approach because no one will win that battle. I do believe that a higher form of leadership and intelligence and evolution and enlightenment would require that we do get along and that we figure out a way to get along. And I do believe that that's possible, regardless of how people think or historically have thought or what we think about them. Like you look at Russia and somebody might tell you, well, you can never settle Ukraine, because Putin is already there and he's already taken up all this land and he's already invaded Crimea and he's never leaving. And so what are you suggesting, that we stop the war and we make the Ukrainians give up all that land? Well, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that there's a way to get Putin to withdraw completely from Ukraine, including Crimea, and to end the war and to save human lives. And it's a negotiated settlement. And it's complicated, and it would have a lot of moving parts, and it wouldn't be limited to activity within Ukraine. It would take on it would be a bigger deal, right? Maybe it would involve having Putin become part of NATO. Maybe it would involve allowing him to participate in the European economy, right? Who knows what the parameters of that deal would look like. But any deal is possible, right? Including a deal that causes him to fully withdraw and never, fight again in Ukraine.
Goes back to something I watched or read, I can't remember, but it was when Bob Iger went to Jobs and they had issues together. I think it was Disney and Pixar, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Paraphrasing. Anywho, it was not good.
Yeah.
And Iger came in as the guy that was now running the company as the peacemaker and was able to negotiate the deal.
Yeah.
And they got back together. Yeah. And it took off, right? So is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
that somebody like that would need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I follow too.
Yeah,
I get it.
I'm an eternal optimist. Yeah. Okay, I just am. Sure. I have had great success in trying to resolve conflict. Right? So I believe that conflict can be resolved, right? I've seen conflicts that other people have told me are unresolvable, and I've resolved them. So I know it can be done, right? And so when I look at the Middle Eastern conflict, the Arab states and the Jews, when I look at Ukraine and Russia, when I look at Pakistan and India, no matter what the conflict is, the race issue in the United States, the gender issues in the United States, all of these issues are resolvable. It just requires effective communication, right? Right now, we don't have effective communication. We have people talking over each other. We have people who don't listen. We have people with closed minds. We have people that think they know more than they know, right? That's not effective communication, right? But if you are able to actually cause people to listen, to stop and listen, and we talked about this a little bit about how, one of the ways you get people to listen is you take their side of the story and you listen to them first. And then you repeat back what it is that they just told you so that now they're very clear that you understand them. Once they know that you fully understand them, so you tell them what they just told you better than they told you themselves, right? You say, here's what I hear you saying, Manny. You're saying this, and you're saying this, and you're saying this, and you're nodding your head, and you're going, yeah, he gets it. He's got all my points. Yes, this is what I've said. Now you're able to listen. Now that you know that I know what you think, you don't have to keep convincing me or educating me or explaining to me what you think, because I know. Yeah. And once you know I know, now you're ready to listen. So that's how I begin a negotiation or a dialogue is I listen to you, I repeat back what it is that you told me so that you know I understand, and I try to articulate it very, accurately and effectively, and then I start to tell you my story and what I want you to know. And now I at least have you open to listening. And then I communicate that in a way, what in that message might you be likely to agree on, right? So let's talk about that and let's get some buy-in. Let's get some agreement, right? Just like the guy who's trying to influence the mind of the suspect that they're trying to convince of committing murder, right? He's getting buy-in. He's getting agreement, right? So I'll start to get some agreement from you on my issue, right? And I'll see what it is that we can agree on, right? And then I'll work my way up towards what I believe, right? And maybe I can't get you to go all the way. Maybe you can't, you won't go all the way with me. So let's say we're talking about guns, right? And I want gun control and you don't. And so first of all, I explain the Second Amendment. I understand it. I hear the history. I know about the Defense Against Tyranny. I hear everything you're saying. I fundamentally agree with a lot of what you're saying. But, now let me tell you what I'm thinking, right? Do you really want your neighbor and their child, their 15-year-old kid, defending their home with an AR-15? Where they can blast through the walls in your home by accident and kill your children, right? Is that really what you want? Or can we give them a shotgun? Right. Or can we give them a pistol that is less likely to cause death in your home across the street, right? Or can we simply agree that, there ought to be background checks so that people who are on the terrorist watch list are not getting guns and people with mental illness are not getting guns, right? Can we agree on that? What can we agree on, right? What can we, do together? Well, you don't want to do background checks because you don't want them having all that information. You don't want them knowing about all those things so that they can come and confiscate the guns, right? Well, maybe there's some kind of a compromise along those lines where the information can be anonymized or, something that we can do to address your concerns. But the bottom line is that in communication, in effective communication, there has to be effective listening and there has to be a willingness to compromise and a willingness to try to collaborate on strategies that will work, right? I've heard a lot about what won't work. But our job is to find something that will work. So what can we find that will work, right? So this is how you solve complex problems. Yeah. And this is how you go about addressing some of the country's biggest issues. First, you create awareness. Then you create understanding and communication, creating an awareness of our interdependence with one another. The fact that you need me, Manny. I need you, okay? We both need each other, okay? You alone, as let's say you're a liberal, right? And you've got 170 million people on your side of the equation, but there's 170 million on the other side of the equation. You're not going to get where you need to get without bringing some of those other 170 million along with you, right? So how are you going to do that? There's got to be some level of compromise. There's got to be some openness to listening. Yeah. There's got to be some willingness to adjust to. And so one of the things that I've learned as I've gotten older is that, Manny, it's not about what I think or what you think. It's not about what I want or what you want. It's about what's best for all of us. Because if we start focusing on what's best for all of us, in the end, I will benefit from that and you will benefit from that.
Yeah.
If you focus exclusively on what's best for you, even you won't benefit because at the end of the day, that will cause everything to come tumbling down, right? It's like you're playing at a crap table, right? And you're rolling and you're winning and the table's moving your way and you're loving the game, okay? But all of a sudden you notice that the front doors to the casino open up and a big crowd of angry, hungry, poor people come in. And they're looking at your crap table and they're watching you roll those dice and they're watching all that money and they're watching you have your drinks, and they come in and they say, you know what? We don't like this, right? And they throw up the crap table and all of a sudden the game's over. There is no game, right? So because you ignored all those people for decade after decade after decade after decade, eventually they came in and they said, game over, right? So pay attention to them. Don't wait until they're destroying what you've got going.
So if I'm summarizing that right there, is that, and again, I could be way off, is that the politicians looking back at the people and saying, hey, don't forget about us, meaning we're saying that to the politicians. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Where I'm saying, hey, we're watching you, Mr. Politician. Don't continue to piss us off in a way where
Manny,
you're going to mess this opportunity that you think you have up, because we, the people, are going to rise up and be like, we've had it. We're pissed off.
The number one prescription that I would give the American people is to do exactly what you just described, is to march on Washington peacefully in mass, right? Imagine if so you had a 1 million man march, Martin Luther King, you had a 1 million man march on Washington, and we still talk about it. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you had a 3 to 5 million person march on Washington, completely peaceful, and they went up with a list of 10 demands, just 10 very simple demands. Yeah. Okay, we want term limits. Mm-hmm. We want an end to campaign. We want campaign finance reform. We want an end to gerrymandering. Right? These are our 10 top 10 list of challenges. Right? We want universal health care. Whatever is on the wish list. Okay. If 5 million people showed up at the Washington Capitol and just said, here are our demands. Don't make us come back. You wouldn't need a January 6th. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't need to rush the Capitol. You wouldn't need any violence. You wouldn't need anything that was illegal. You would just need 3 to 5 million people walking up very earnestly and saying, we've had enough. Mm-hmm. Get your shit together or we're coming back. And trust me, you don't want us coming back. Because on the second round, on the comeback, there would be violence, But you could avoid that completely, where they would do exactly what needs to be done. Circumstances would have changed, and they would have responded to those circumstances. If they had any intelligence whatsoever, or any sense of self-preservation whatsoever, they would accommodate those 3 to 5 million people.
I think they're poking the bear like as much as they can, and they're seeing how much they can get away with right now. And I think people are tired of being bullied.
Yeah, and they're trying to scare people.
Yeah.
They're going out and arresting 1,000 people for January 6th.
But people are looking at it like,
Trump 4 times.
How stupid can you be, and how much ignorance do you think we have before we're going to say something back, like you just said, where it's unacceptable?
I'm hoping that the response is gradual, as opposed to the straw that broke the camel's back, and then all of a sudden we've got riots in the streets,
of course,
which is what we normally see. But we need to, I think we need to try our best to avoid that. And I think that the way that you avoid that is through increasing awareness, encouraging dialogue, creating understanding, having better effective communication. And what we're asking for is right. Mm-hmm. What we're asking for is right.
Totally.
When you say end gerrymandering, when you say give us universal health care, these are things that should exist. We're supposedly the greatest country on earth. How many countries have universal health care and we don't? Right? It's obvious.
Well, you just said it too. It's they only care about themselves. I mean, do they really give a shit about the American people? I mean, my opinion is not at all.
Okay, so work with that. So Milton Friedman won a Nobel Prize at the University of Chicago for economics, and his simple observation, his Nobel Prize winning observation, was that people operate out of self-interest. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you ask the question, do they really give a shit? Like as if to say, well, if they don't, it's game over. No, it's okay.
Makes sense.
It's okay. If they don't give a shit about you, what do they give a shit about? Right? Themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then put themselves in jeopardy. Make them make a choice for self-preservation.
Interesting.
Make them act in their own self-interest. Make them understand that unless they do what is required, they will be removed. Mm-hmm. They will be removed either through the ballot or through some other means. They will be removed. And there may be, more adverse consequences. Yeah. Right? But the more that they feel that their own self-interest is at stake, the more quickly they will act.
It'd be interesting to see where this all goes, man.
Yeah, just work with the information that you have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the motivations aren't what they should be, work with whatever the motivations are.
Yeah. We could stay here for 5 hours. This could be a 5-hour podcast, man. But I know we've all got to get back to our days. But such a sudden stop. I know, ladies and gentlemen. I honestly could keep Uncle G here for days because this is such a powerful topic. I don't know if I ever got the loop closed on the fact that we were fighting the Ukraine war for what reason? Because of that arms race? It's like we're trying to
So I think there are a couple of reasons. I think
for me, because I was like, how the hell did that wrap up there?
I think the first reason is that we want to make sure that China and Russia do not become a double team, right, against the United States. And so we are taking out the weaker of the two in an attempt to prevent that formidable alliance. We're making that alliance less formidable. And we're doing it for a relatively low expenditure. It's a good return on investment is what the Pentagon is saying, basically. So that's probably our main motivation. A secondary motivation is who wanted this war with Russia? Was it the United States or was it Europe? And my argument is it was Europe. Why was it Europe? Well, first of all, when countries' economies are doing poorly, one of the best ways to pull a sluggish economy out of its doldrums is to go to war, right? So following the Great Depression, the United States went to war in World War II, right? So you look at countries around the world, and this is a normal occurrence where a country that is economically challenged will go to war. In fact, I read a quote recently from a German company that is making tanks, and the quote from the CEO was, "We have not been this busy in decades. We cannot keep we cannot produce any more, right? We're just, we're loving this, right? So it's great for the economy to be at war, right? And so that may be part of the European motivation, right? And then we, the United States, have an alliance with Europe, right? Our NATO alliance. And so if they feel that they are, need to go to war with Russia, we need to back their play, essentially, to maintain that alliance. If we don't do that, then they're going to say, well, what do we need you for, right? If you're not there when we need you, what do we need you for, right? So, and China, over the last 20 years, has been ascending, right? Their economy has been ascending. Their relationships around the world have been expanding. The BRICS nations have gotten together to form a counterbalance to NATO, right? So BRICS is Brazil, India, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, And so they've just admitted 6 new countries, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Argentina, I forget who else, and they've got something like 19 additional applicants. So we're kind of picking sides. The Chinese and BRICS are on one side. The U.S. and NATO are on the other side. BRICS is expanding to match us as we are expanding. NATO has moved further east. The balance of power in Europe has moved further east. So I read something recently that said that Poland in 3 years will have a larger military than the British, the Germans, and the French combined. Poland.
Wow.
Yeah. So why is Poland all of a sudden committing so much of their GDP to a military buildup, right? And we've got to love that because we're selling them the weapons, right? So now Poland is going to become the shot caller. If they're the biggest military in Europe, they're going to become the European shot caller. England and France and Germany, their economies are in decline. Their reach and influence is in decline. France had and England have been big colonial powers, but they're now reaping the backlash of that colonialism. France is reaping the backlash in Africa from its colonialism in Africa, and Great Britain is now receiving the backlash from its colonialism in India and in the Middle East, right? So they are declining nations, right? Poland and Finland and Eastern Europe are becoming the ascending nations. And so we are becoming more responsive to what they're asking for. And what they're asking for, Poland hates Russia. Poland has a long adversarial history with Russia, right? But Poland is going to be the European shot caller, and we want them as an ally. And so we're starting to listen to, what others are saying and asking us to do.
Watching and this understanding how this all plays out, trying to figure out all the moves that are being made.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
This is the area of complex problem solving, right? You take all the pieces, you take a helicopter perspective, you look at all the different moving pieces, and you try to make sense of it. Yeah. And this is what I do. This is what I've been doing for 30 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What are you promoting, man? What do you want people to find you for? Are you selling something?
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm not really selling.
I know.
I've written a book called Millennial Samurai, which you're aware of.
Yep.
And I'm giving it away for free. So you can go to millennialsamurai.com and you can download the entire book for free. I wish everybody would go there and download that book. Over 13,000, close to 14,000 people have already downloaded it for free. And that is a way for me to leave a legacy, right? If my goal would be to have 1 million people download the book for free, right? If I could do that, I would feel much better about passing away, that I had actually had a big impact.
Sure.
So, and I'm getting tremendous feedback. The things that people are saying online about the book, the comments that they're leaving on Amazon. You can also buy the book at Amazon. For every book someone buys, some people prefer the hard copy, so they go out and buy the book. It's only $29, and for every book they buy, I give away a free book to someone who can't afford it. So the idea is to educate and create awareness and lift up the public, people helping people, me helping people that need and want my guidance and direction, people who don't want it, who think they know the answers or who think I'm past my prime or whatever. God bless you. Godspeed. Do whatever you want to do. I'm not trying to lead horses to water. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm just here. Yeah. I'm a resource. I'm trying to give what I've got to give, and those who want it, and those who don't, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
I hope you have a brilliant life.
Oh God, it's a great book, man. You're probably just a couple big podcasts away from 1 million.
I hope.
I told you that.
I hope. Yeah. I hope.
Just get on a couple big ones, and then the book goes to infinity, man. That's all you need.
I hope.
Dude, God bless, man. Such a great conversation as always, man. And I love you, man.
Thank you.
You're the man.
Thank you.
You're the man.
I appreciate your having me.
Of course, man.
And I'm thrilled at what you're doing. I love this concept, always on the grow.
Yeah.
I think it's very needed. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly important today for people. You're doing a public service. You're leaving a legacy. Yeah. And I hope more people, tune in and subscribe to your channel. And
we're there, buddy. We're in the building phase, my friend. So listen, when I'm 65, motherfucking thing's gonna be huge. It's gonna take over the world, baby.
I love it.
I'm gonna be at war with everybody else that's creating content. I'm gonna win the war. I love you, man. God bless, brother.
Thank you.